how did the trans lobby capture institutions, media, schools, academia, legislatures, etc., so swiftly in the last few years?
Because trans-identified men's lobby, I'm now learning to pronounce it, they actually cooperate quite good with men, and that's how it's make it more simple to get to media, gender-sensitive media, pro-feminist media. I have to say that unfortunately in Russia we don't have so many pro-feminist media. But the most popular, I think, is website Wonderzine, which positioning itself as open-minded, and they writes about different issues related to women and LGBT rights. And definitely, unfortunately, I have to acknowledge that they write a lot on transgender ideology. So they make up this impression that the whole feminist movement supports trans people and ideology of transition, including transitioning children and teenagers. And this is a side that they actually are supports such words and phrases as sex work, etc. At the moment, there are no influence of trans lobby within the government or legislatures due to general conservative agenda of Russia. But anyway, I believe within the liberals, the oppositions, of course, there are some. And in fact, our liberal opposition, this community, it's misogynistic community, because they support sexual harassment, for instance, and some issues like that. I think, well, they normalize sexual harassment, I would say, sexual harassment against women.
I think we still have to recognise that across the world, men are mostly in power, and transgenderism is a men's rights movement. Most men are, whether they realise it or not, are misogynist, even if it's just to the extent that they don't challenge and they profit from misogynist systems which hold back women. The best analogy for how the policy capture happened came from a young woman called Charlie, who founded the Detransitioners Advocacy Network here in UK. And she said, you know, when an ambulance goes to an emergency and shoves its way through the traffic, then that ambulance is like the gay rights movement. And the trans movement is like the car that sees the path the ambulance has made and without any good reason sneaks in behind it to take advantage of everyone leaving space for the ambulance. They've learned our techniques, which we've applied to very, very genuine issues, women's rights, gay rights, over many, many decades. And they've used those techniques for a completely spurious and unworthy issue. They have, of course, as somebody just said in the chat, thank you very much, got handmaids in key posts. I think a lot of men would be willing handmaids. And we've got, in the UK, we have a charitable structure where over the last 20 years, significant funding streams have secured the future of organisations like Stonewall and Amnesty. And once you get that, you get people getting decent salaries in these organisations. And once, I hate to be cynical, but once you get people getting good salaries in a charity, their first priority becomes to keep those decent salaries and to keep their jobs. And there is a lot of funding available to promote transgenderism. Everyone should read Jennifer Bielek's wonderful article on the funding behind the transgender movement. It is huge. It's on our website, objectnow.org, if you don't know where to find it. I call them chasnesses now. They're half charities and half businesses. People like Stonewall and Amnesty. They really just want to keep the funding coming in, and it pays them. You know, Ruth Hunt, who was the chair of Stonewall when it went trans to the exclusion of lesbians, has recently been given a seat in the House of Lords and has got a nice career ahead of her, claiming expenses for doing very little. So it's very clever. You have to concede it to them. It's very, very clever. Unfortunately for them, it's a terrible cause. People will find out in due course. We've already got detransitioners as well as parents saying, this is awful, you know, it's not working out as planned. There's still not one single decent long-term study that proves that changing your gender to the extent that you can, of course you can't really, to the extent that changing your gender makes you any happier. There's no evidence. They're making public policy on the basis of zero evidence, and that's one of the reasons why the Conservatives, heaven help us, decided not to introduce self-ID in the UK.
Along the lines of what Jan said about the ambulance making, and then the trans ideology coming in right behind and taking up that space, that's the everything that the LGBs built, the resources, the organizations, the funding, the infrastructure, the public profile, and the public acceptance got snatched up by trans activists and abused and used and swerved over to focus on them. So they snatched up the resources, the foundation that had already been built painstakingly by LGB. The thing that I really wanted to bring forth was, Jan mentioned Jennifer Billick, because that article, the rich white men that are funding the trans movement. You can find that, as she said, Jan said it on Object. You can also find it at Jennifer Billick's blog, the11thhourblog.com. The 11th is the number and then the TH, the11thhourblog.com. And she's got a number of articles there that expose the funding. And the billionaires are funding this. Biotech industry, John Stryker, the biotech industry, Arcus, which is, look at Arcus, ARCUS, she's got articles about that, how they're funding. And it goes back, this is a very deliberate attempt to get it, a successful attempt to get it under the radar of the public's view, parents and public. You'll also find the Denton law firm document that was, Jennifer exposes it on her the 11th Hour blog. And that document spells out the tactics that deliberately say, get under the radar before, get into the legislatures, before it gets to the public, before it gets to the parents' eyes. You keep it under and then you slip it in. And so it's a deliberate tactic, and I think we need to know about it. So I would, again, refer you to that blog and the article there. You can also look up Denton Law Firm, which claims it's the biggest law firm in the world. Very influential, very rich, and what that document does in terms of tactics and how we've been hoodwinked. And because there's never been, this happened, the media was just saturated with pro-gender ideology, a gender identity ideology, before the public even knew what's going on. And a lot of the public still doesn't know what's going on. And they don't understand the ramifications. So I think we need to be savvy about how this tactic is, and maybe let other people know. It's funded by billionaires, and it was a deliberate tactic to go under the radar of the public's view. This
trans policy is very profitable for neo-patriarchy's world. Nothing, like we can see that nothing really raises, if not with the support of general power institutions. This sort of like, we're giving you what you want. So why are you complaining? Like you want to be whoever you want. You want to be gay, you want to be lesbian, you want to be trans. We're giving you what you want. But of course, that's an illusion, and that's a sort of gaslighting as well. And this like, if you want justice, it should be for everyone. So if you're like gender critical, that means that you're taking justice from them or something like that. That again, it brings us to gaslighting the people who want to be critical, because being critical doesn't mean being aggressive, doesn't mean, like desire to kill or burn all these people. It's to rethink critically rethink something and to deconstruct it, first of all. This support and protection is not equal, of course, and it's just profitable to keep this root of patriarchy, which is the principle of complementarity. They be okay with everything we or everybody else bring up if people still be marrying and living into and having children, making families in this neo-patriarchy. They don't care. It's like, again, it's the policy of you can be whoever you want. And the catch is that people do believe that because no one said to them that they're not free to choose, because they have their own walls that they build, and also the culture experience that build these walls. They think they have free will, they can choose wherever they want, they can, or if, for example, if they take the opposite position of the mainstream position, that means they are free to choose and everything, and they're not mainstream, of course, but culture builds our minds, culture shapes it. And neoliberals, they know, those who making decisions, they know that if they will give us this illusion of choice, we still been making choices that are profitable for them. Again, root of patriarchy, principle of complementarity, marrying, families, and so on. So I think that, trans ideology, even more rooting with these gender roles. That's why it's so profitable for them. That's why they're rooting for it. And as I said in the chat, that's interesting how you can be canceled immediately for just mispronouncing the person, but still, like in Russia or in Ukraine, if you're extremely sexist, or even if you killed your wife, if you killed your girlfriend, or if you're just violent and aggressive, you still won't face any actual consequences.